So I'm hoping to be able to play you another Melanie Horsnell song a little later. But first I want to play you an interview I did on Saturday with a high country legend, a lady by the name of June Wilkinson. And I wanted to talk to her about the Brumbies issue in the Kosciuszko National Park. It's a hot topic at the moment with Four Corners showcasing the issues around Brumbies control. Very passionate argument on both sides of the equation. Strong support for Brumbies in the National Park, and a lot of people, including myself, who are very anxious about the amount of damage that the feral horse population is doing in the pristine Kosciuszko National Park. If you didn't see the Four Corners show on Brumbies, I suggest that you should. It's worth a look. I thought it was a pretty good discussion over both sides of the equation. Peter Cochrane, ex-Nationals politician, leading the charge for support for Brumbies in the National Park. In fact, he wrote the legislation that protects wild horses in the Kosciuszko National Park, which was interesting that a private citizen with a vested financial interest in Brumbies was allowed to write the legislation and has protected Brumbies and seen a consequent rapid increase in their numbers in the high country, estimated to be about 14,000 by national parks. Peter Cochrane read out Banjo Patterson's The Man from Snowy River for the Four Corners TV crew, sitting in front of a fire in his Akubra, reading out Banjo Patterson's The Man from Snowy River. Certainly there is a very romantic notion about horses in the high country. And that's what I wanted to talk to June Wilkinson about. She has a long history in the high country and actually is a distant relative of Banjo Patterson's. So I started off by asking June what her relationship was with Banjo Patterson. Here's what she had to say.
Well, my relationship with Banjo Patterson is that it was my grandmother's first cousin, and so that's the nearest way I can describe his relation to me.
Yep.
And I grew up seeing photos of him, family photos of him, with my grandmother and all my family.
Yep.
And I do remember often asking my grandmother who was the man from Snowy River, and she said that Banjo definitely had told them that it was no one and everyone. It was not about anyone in particular.
Do you know where the Man from Snowy River was actually set? Is there any clues about that?
I think there's a combination of where Banjo spent a lot of time in his younger days around the Bathurst area, and there's writings of him describing mustering Brumbies in that area. I think he's just combined it all together with the snowy and the mountains anywhere where there were wild horses.
Yeah, yep. And you mentioned that they were rounding up wild horses to cull. Is that correct?
Absolutely. He said it was just a horrible thing to have to do, but it had to be done, and that was the reason that they were rounding them up. And they didn't want them encroaching on their grazing land.
Right. And how do you think? How would Banjo Patterson regard the situation today in the Kosciuszko National Park with wild horses?
Well, I think he'd be horrified how he's been taken out of context,
Mm-hmm.
and the same for Elaine Mitchell. I've read that I've got one of her books stating that she thought it was getting very serious, the damage that livestock were doing to the high country, and she was quite accepting of the fact that there had to be something done or the mountain high country would be destroyed from hard-hooved animals.
Yep. Elaine Mitchell wrote the Silver Brumbie
That's
theory.
right, yes.
And her name's often used when talking about romantic notions of horses in the high country.
Yes, she
But
knew
you think that she also would be upset with the number of horses in the high country?
I would think so, from what I've read of her, the bits that I've read about her concern for those areas.
I'm playing you an interview with high country legend June Wilkinson. June's 80. She still rides horses. She's had a long history in the high country. In fact, her family used to graze the high country in one of the snow leases in the high country. And they willingly gave up their high country grazing lease because they could see the damage that was being done by cattle in the high country. I asked June just to tell us a little bit about her life and experiences in the high country.
I'm on the south of Cooma on the Monero Plains, so I went from over that side of the mountains out to the plains.
Yep.
But in the interim period, I've ridden really all my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I just can't believe that there could be anyone say that horses don't damage the environment, because I've ridden in all those areas with endurance rides, and as soon as there's a number of horses, I remember riding in an endurance ride out there, circling the lower areas of the high country, and you could, after the horses had gone through, you couldn't even recognize the creek crossings. There were boulders knocked over, everything's pugged and churned up just as if an army had gone through.
Right.
And so I can't believe that. And I've ridden in little groups, and we look back and think that wasn't good. We tried to do our best to not do damage, but you look back and no one can deny that you're not doing damage. Mm-hmm. So I can't believe that anyone could say that the horses are not doing damage to such a delicate ecosystem.
As I mentioned in the introduction, she or her family used to graze the high country with a snow lease, and here's what June had to say about that.
Our family had a snow lease on the Kosciuszko Plains.
Uh-huh. And what did you graze up there?
Sheep and cattle.
Sheep and cattle. And your family lost that grazing lease? Yes,
we were one of the first to go because we were in the higher area.
Yeah.
And it was greatly missed, but it was very much accepted that the time had come. And
did your family recognise that grazing in the high country was causing damage?
Yes, my father did, and anyone could see. Even as a child, I could see that the mountains were becoming degraded and overstocked.
June, I was talking to Richard Swain a couple of weeks ago, and he made a very good point that lack of control of horses is a real kick in the guts for the high country grazers who willingly gave up their leases because they could see the damage being done by cattle and sheep, are now watching the same or even more damage being done by the wild horses. Is that a fair point, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say that the argument is, it's not about whether people are horse lovers or not. It's about Australians wanting to protect the national park or override science and let it be taken over by feral horses.
So, June Wilkinson, local legend in the high country. What is the solution to the wild horse problem in the high country?
Well, I think the solution is simple. I don't think there should be any horses in the national park.
The science would certainly support that position. We talked to Dr. Ben Kearney 2 weeks ago, a scientist from the Australian National University who's looked at water catchment and bog management issues in the high country, and the damage to the waterway has been caused by the Brumbies there, leading to a drying out of the high country, which has enormous ramifications for the catchment for the Snowy and Murray rivers. I asked June what she thought we should do about Brumbies in the high country.
I thought that national parks were meant to be free of introduced, as best we can, free of introduced animals.
There you have it.